Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Today is what? Castillo Day. All right, all together. Alors, enfants de la patrie, le jeu de gloire est arrivé. Which is really true. The day of glory has arrived. These authors right over here. So it's very exciting that we have them with us. This is John Charles from our staff, who also has baked, and he will be putting out fabulous cookies. The pepper one with the chocolate is amazing because I have already stolen one. It was delicious. And with him is Stuart Turton, whose debut novel is what we are going to be discussing. And John, it is a discussion club book for what, September? Yes, it is. Right. Sarah John is the host of the discussion club, so they're going to talk about EVELYN HARDCASTLE, and then Linda and I are going to talk about SHAMED. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I was thrilled when Barbara said Stuart was coming because I loved his debut novel, which has been called Downton Abbey but with a higher body count. Or, if you like,
they all have it coming.
Mashup of Agatha Christie, Groundhog Day, and Quantum Leap. The book was quite anticipated and it met expectations by winning Great Britain's Costa First Novel Award, the most enjoyable novel. So first of all, thank you for writing such a wonderful book.
Thank you.
And first, let's go into your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. If I just talk like this, can everyone hear me, or do I
No,
need this?
You need the microphone for the Facebook.
Oh, I see. All right. So my background, I was a journalist in Britain. Explains the accent. I was doing that for about 12, 13 years. But in the back of my head, I always wanted to write this book. So I actually went into journalism just to learn how to write. It wasn't because I was a particularly good journalist, and I wasn't. I ended up being a travel journalist, which isn't really journalism. It's basically just going on holiday and being paid for it, and that's awesome. And then I finally got the idea for the book I wanted to write when I was 35. So it took a long time to come because I never wanted to write this book since I was 8. And when it came, I just dropped everything. So I was living in Dubai at the time. I'd met my wife. We'd been going out for about 3 months at that point. And I was like, I can't write this book in Dubai. I want to write an Agatha Christie style mystery. You can't do that in the desert among skyscrapers. You've got to be in England. It has to be raining. Everyone has to be glum. I need a class system. I need some upper class stickers. Upper class people. And I need to murder them all. So I begged her to come back to London with me, which she did, God bless her. And we moved from a 30th floor apartment in Dubai overlooking the marina on good jobs with good salaries to a 1-bedroom apartment in London above a children's nursery where children were screaming every day and the smell of dirty diapers, that's what you call them here, and dirty diapers would just drift the stairs into our flat. It was beguiling.
Tell us a little bit about the premise of 7 Half-Deaths of EVELYN HARDCASTLE.
So it's a straight up Agatha Christie style mystery. Who's read those? Who likes those? Great, we're all going to get along. It is one of those, so the isolated country house, the suspects all in the place, and then somebody dies at the end of it. But the difference in my book is that my character, who is tasked with solving the murder, every time he doesn't do it, the day starts over in a Groundhog Day style loop, except he's in the body of a different guest in the house. So he keeps bumping into past hymns and future hymns. So he's all at once the suspects in the murder and the person who is investigating the murder. And they all don't want the same thing, strangely. So, but yeah, if you just read it straight up, it's an Agatha Christie mystery. It just has some bits on the end of it.
You've been quoted as saying the first year you spent writing the book was just awful. Tell us about the evolution.
I love it when people say you've been quoted as doing things. That's like, God,
It's a journalism thing.
I know it is. It's like a record of thing I've said, which I hate. The evolution of it was awful because it's one day. It's just one day in a loop. So it's not like Groundhog Day where you do the entire day over and over again. I was very keen to avoid that because I think that would get quite dull in print. It's good when Bill Murray does it. It's not so good when you're reading it. So what my book does is you see the day from different bits. So there's a forest near the house, and some things happen in the forest. There's a big cemetery, things happen in the cemetery, things happen in the house, different corners of the house. You're never quite you're seeing the day from loads of different angles. And just planning that out, as you can imagine, was hell. It was because the timeline had to work. I wanted the book to be fair. I want you to be able to solve it. I want you to play along. It's a game. I'm playing, you're playing, you can solve it. All the clues are right there in front of you. My character character never gets given any information that you don't also have. Nothing. So in order to make that in order to make that work, and in order to make sure the timeline held together the way I wanted it to, I had to plan it out. And that alone took 3 months. And that was before I ever wrote a word of the book. And then when I did sit down to write the book, I just kept having good ideas. Like one good idea after another. And every time I had a good idea, the book would veer off in a direction that wasn't in the plan. And inevitably what would happen is I would end up tossing 20,000 words away, or like 2 months worth of work, because it just didn't, I couldn't make it work. So in the end it took 2.5 years and it was hell.
There are so many different characters and plot twists in the book, and even inhabits the bodies of different characters, seeing events through their viewpoint. Did you have a favorite character, or one that spoke to you as an author?
Yeah, there's obese banker called Lord Ravenclaw, who is really interesting, because I was writing this at the time, the financial crash had just happened, around 2008, just after that. We all hated bankers, and he's a banker, and I just wrote him to be this loathsome character, but he just ended up having angles that I didn't expect. He had like bits to him that I was suddenly enamoured by, and I suddenly got really interested in him, and in a way that some of the other characters I planned, when I started writing them, I actually found I didn't like them as much as I thought I would. They were less interesting than I'd hoped, so I used them for other purposes. But he just kept having depth. He kept being a real person in my head. He would interact with the characters in interesting and unexpected ways. And I was tempted, I roughly gave every character in the book about 10,000 words. That's kind of how it's planned out. And I just wanted to kind of stay with him. I wanted almost to write the entire book from his perspective and just cast off the entire concept. So yeah, I really love writing him.
Agatha Christie obviously has played an influence on your own writing. As a reader, what do you love most about her work? And do you have any other favorite authors or books that have influenced you?
Yeah, so Agatha Christie, I think like everybody else, like I just love the ending. You read, there's very few other books. Agatha Christie, I think I can 100% say this, you don't really read it for the reading-y bit. Like, you don't read it for the 95% of the pages of the book. They're all there just to get you to the end, right? Like, it's not a roller coaster by any means. It's a rainbow to a pot of gold. You just want to get to the gold. So, I absolutely love that, because that twist almost never fails. Like, I think she understood perfectly structurally what she was doing. She knew what you wanted from her book, and she always gave it to you. Even in like the lesser works, the books that aren't quite as good, that twist or that idea was usually brilliant, even if the writing didn't carry through on it. The other people who've influenced me are everybody, like everybody who ever solved the mystery, really. Raymond Chandler did it. There's loads of Raymond Chandler in there. There's loads of Conan Doyle in there. Anybody who ever had to go out and find a body with a knife in its back and work out how that got there, was of interest to me, because I have basically 8 characters trying to solve this mystery, and what I wanted to do was make 8 of them feel like their own style of detective and kind of honour the detectives who come before. So you've got a Nero Wolfe style character in there, you've got a noir Philip Marlowe character kind of in there, you've got a Sherlock Holmes style character in there. Not overt, but like they've got the bits of those characters, the flavour of those characters. And so there's times in that book where you can kind of feel like, well, what would it be like if Nero Wolfe met Sherlock Holmes? Well, there's the chapter. That's what it's a bit like. So I had a lot of fun doing that.
What do you know now, after writing your first novel, that you wish you had known when you were starting out?
Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I'm writing my second novel now, and I have learned nothing. It's I thought I had. I came out of the first novel thinking, yep, those are all my mistakes, and I'll never do that again. Just to put this in perspective, I've just turned in my second novel. My first novel was 130,000 words. My second novel is 170,000 words. That's an entire book too long. An entire book too long. So it's going to have to be cut down drastically to make it an actual functioning book that people want to read and not kill other people with. So that's what I'm doing now. So no, I've learned nothing. I'm hopeless. Absolutely hopeless.
Is there any particular reason why there's a slight change in titles between your UK and US edition?
Yes. So when my book was bought by Source Books here a little after it had already been out in the UK for a little while. And they came and bought it, and they read it and they liked it, which is good. And then it went around the company. It's a slightly different style here in the UK. So it was bought by an editor who liked it, but then she sent it around the company, and the rest of the company liked it as well, including the sales team, who were like, well, actually, maybe we can give this a bit more of a marketing push. So they delayed it by about 4 or 5 months or something. So they held back on it, and in the intervening time, a book came out called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which in the UK that's not a big title, but here it is a big title. So in the UK we were very blasé. We were just like, it'll be fine. My editor in the UK told the story of how when she was at her last publisher, they published in the same month, and she swears this is true, 3 books called Black Chalk. 3. One was a biography, one was a piece of fiction, and one of them was like a piece of non-fiction about like a war atrocity or something, but they all came out in the same month, so we didn't care, but over here it was a bit of a concern. So we went round the houses. I don't know if you have the expression here, but yes, we talked for a very long time about changing this title. We got to some really wacky titles, because that's what happens when you're desperate and you're like, I'll take anything. So we had like really bad titles like The Everlasting Life of Evelyn Hardcastle at one point, which wouldn't have suited this book at all.
Sounds a bit metaphysical.
Yeah, exactly. So just desperation set in, like we were, panicked and fevered, I think. And eventually the CEO of Source Books, Dominic Bracker, came back and was like, why don't we just stick a half in it? Well, we'll just got the 7.5 deaths, that'll do it, that's enough. And God bless her, she just ended our purgatory. So that's why we have slightly different titles.
So you mentioned you turned in your next book.
Mm-hmm.
Any expectations to when we can look for it, or?
God, you sound just like my publisher. We're looking at, I don't know in the US, I think we're going for simultaneous release dates for this one. So it looks like theoretically May of next year, but that's a big theoretically.
Yeah, that can change.
Yeah, especially with me, because I'm still sort of noodling it around and trying to make it work and be. But again, this is what I said earlier, I did this with 7 Deaths, except in 7 Deaths I did it without anybody looking over my shoulder asking me when it would be coming. So when I wrote that book, I finished it, walked away for 3 months, then came back to it and ripped the guts out of it and all, not start again, but moved a lot of things around, got rid of bits, because I gave myself that distance to work out what was wrong with it. With your second book, you don't have that distance because your agent's like, hi, can I have that book now? And also, I had a baby last year, she's just turned 1, she's the most adorable creature on the planet. I'm very sorry, but all your children are not as good as my child. I'm sure I put out there as a fact. Science, I think, has proven this. But she is super adorable, but she absolutely destroyed my life for about 7 months. Absolutely crushed me. So I missed 5 deadlines writing this book, so I'm very behind, and I'm just got to the point now where I'm happy with it and comfortable with it and know exactly, after a year and a half of writing it, what it actually should have been. So, May 2020? Yep.
Why don't we go ahead and see if anyone has questions for you from our readers.
I'm really nice. I don't bite. I also try and answer an American. Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Oh, I'm so sorry. This isn't even a phone from this country. That was my wife. I don't think she knows I've gone. That's really terrible. Put that on silent, better late than never, eh? I'm terribly sorry. Right, okay. Hi.
What is your what can you sort of summarize your second book? Is it similar to the first? Or?
No, it's going to be a supernatural shipwreck Sherlock Holmes novel. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I think it's going to be loads of fun. I think. I'll tell you if it's not. I'll just come back. Don't bother buying the second book. It's rubbish. That's what I'll say. But hopefully it won't come to that. Yeah, that's going to go on Facebook. I'll regret that, won't I?
So, John, have you detailed all the awards? I know you mentioned a couple, but right. awards during this campaign?
Oh, there are UK awards, so you won't have heard of them, so I don't think it matters, really.
Well, it's not a bad idea to tell us about the UK awards, because I've heard of them. I think they're really very prestigious, and congratulate you for them.
Oh, thank you very much.
And a new one, in fact, came in while Stuart and I were just in New York together at Thriller Fest doing different things, and I meant to look it up and tell you what it actually is. Did you have a chance to look it up?
I did, yes. It's the Glass, I think it's called the Glass Bell Award.
The Glass Bell.
Yeah, and it's hosted by a really beautiful and lovely bookshop in the UK called Goldsborough, and they do signed first editions, so they're a great bookshop, and it's the specific award, so that came in. But yeah, I mean, it's been incredible, because you spend so long writing a book, you don't know if anyone's going to like it, you just genuinely don't, and this sort of book, where it's such an out there concept, even when you read it, I don't think it does feel out there, but when you're writing it, you're like, this could go anyway. So to suddenly have it out there and people giving you awards for it, let alone money, is incredible. It's so nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the money, but the awards are also very good.
One of the most common things about publishing is that, and I am forever asked this question, what is the next big thing? And the thing is, you don't know it until you see it. You can't really guess it. So Stuart's book is, I don't know that it'll be the next big thing in the sense that other people will write similar books, because it would be really hard to do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's different, and so people have really responded to it. I think the interesting part in your conversation there is that Agatha Christie, who was as you say, brilliant plotter and always wanted to get to the end, her favorite length for a book, some of you have heard me say this before, is 132 pages.
Yeah.
She wanted you to be able to read it between dinner and bedtime because her plots were so complicated. If it was a big book, you'd forget it, right? And her publisher said it looked so pitiful for what they were charging that they sort of blew it up to make it a little bit longer. But I think it's interesting that you took a different approach. It's not possible to read your book in one sitting.
No, unless you're a super fast reader, or you're willing to go without a lot of food and water, in which case you can possibly do it. But the interesting thing about it is they were putting out 2 and 3 a year at some points because they were so short, and like that blows my mind that she could plot that well. Like, the characters were always just there. They were just there to be murdered, or they were just there to give answers. But they were still characters. Like, they still had clearly defined edges. They still felt real to me. And what, again, is interesting is I grew up in a relatively poor northern working class town in England. We didn't have any posh people where I grew up. I'd never seen one. So reading these books, seeing the adaptations on television, don't know if you guys got those over here with David Suchet and his wonderful moustache. I'd watch those on television and be like, that was my Tolkien, that was my dragons and dwarves and elves. That was as unreal to me as that fantasy world. I couldn't make any sense of it. Like, I would watch those and be like, but none of these people seem to go to work. That I don't. Where are they getting their money? Like, I'd be asking these questions of my mum. Mum would just be like, yeah, they're just rich people. And I was like, what is that? What are rich people? So from the beginning, that was what I thought the upper class looked like. It was just, people swanning off to country getaways and driving fast cars. So it was interesting that for me they worked as, twofold. They showed me a bit of the world I'd never known. They made me nostalgic for a period that actually probably didn't exist, and I'd never lived through. But also they're an interesting cultural, historical artifact. They are a nice window into that period.
I think that's true. I mean, Poirot actually had a job. He was in his way a consulting detective like Sherlock Holmes, but Miss Marple clearly was a person of private income, as many women were, the spinster in the village. And to be fair, she wouldn't have been able to go out sleuthing if she were actually working.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a chronic problem in all amateur sleuth books.
Yeah.
That's why there used to be so many people like Chesterton writing about Father Brown, or David, I can't think of his last name, that wrote about Rabbi Small, because people, clerical people, have an income and also leisure time. It's like Grantchester or something where they can do stuff, right? Sorry? Kimmelman, Harry Kimmelman. Right, John knows way more about this than I do, but he's deferring to me that he could actually just speak up. Do you agree with that?
Though Miss Marple, she did have to rely. Miss Marple had to rely on her nephew, Raymond.
Well, for the actual collar, right, because he was a cop, right?
Well, no, also for
You mean even for income?
Yeah, she was kind of a widow, not a
widow, but a
spinster of limited means.
Limited means.
Didn't she
You're
take a
absolutely
job
right.
in one of them where she became a maid to kind of solve the crime or
She
something?
might, yeah.
So she was like earning income while
Right.
doing good for the family she was working for, servants.
And in point of fact, if you read Murder at the Vicarage, that is the book where Christie has her best characters. It's funny,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it's the most rounded. Oh, is that the first Miss Marple? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, short stories, but that's the first novel.
Right. So, but then, as you say, the plot kind of took her away.
Yeah, but again, that's what's mind-blowing about that. Murder at the Vicarage is lovely. It's a lovely piece of writing, but there is obviously, and it did this with the Poirot novels as well, I think, you see the evolution of her where she works out what her audience wants. Because she's a skilled writer when she feels like it, but you can see when she's on her third book of the year, and she's just like, screw it. And she likes...
She probably didn't phrase it quite like that. But
No, it would have been, screw it.
Right.
But there are like there's certain books, Hickory Dock, if you remember that
Yeah.
one, where that's just a lot of people sat in rooms talking, just giving evidence. That's all they do, one after
Right.
another. It's incredibly tedious. And I'm going to go out and be controversial here. Murder on the Orient Express is a terrible book. It's rubbish, and it is rubbish for the same reason. It spends 97% of the time having people lie to you about where they were in a single train compartment. Where were you? I was in the cabin number 2B. Where were you? I was in cabin number 2A. Could you see cabin number 2C from there? I could not see cabin number 2D from there. And it just carries on like that, and then has this amazing ending. So it's just like, that's a brilliant book.
But she liked to experiment with form. I mean, that's when we get the Murder of Roger Ackroyd. We get, you know, she would have these ideas, and we
Yeah.
think they carried her away. So your next book is Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Are you going to move to an original detective at some point, or are you just going to keep like suborning these already characters?
Well, it's not an actual Sherlock Holmes book. It's going to be, it's that deductive method we're going to use. So I want to play in that style for a little bit. In terms of like taking inspiration from those detectives, actually because I love those books and they've kind of gone away a little bit. Like there's the Anthony Horowitz stuff, obviously. There's not a lot of people roaming around writing Sherlock Holmes as the
No,
the
but this
method.
gives me a moment to make an announcement, which is today I just booked the man who wrote the 7.5% Solution, a new Sherlock Holmes book, and he will be here on the 30th of October to talk about it. Do you remember when that came out? It was a real groundbreaking. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
So Stuart, thank you very much. I think what
Thank
we're
you.
going to do is invite Linda up, and then at the
Yay.
end, if you guys want to hang, well, actually, Linda, why don't you just bring the chair?
Sure.
You and I will talk. You can just be furniture for a little bit, and then we'll have a cross conversation at the end. Right. Oh, well, John got up. So you want to sit by Stuart over there, and I'll just stay here? The choreography sometimes of these events is more complicated.
Hello.
All right.
Where have you been?
Here, you have a microphone of your very own, Linda, if you want to turn it on. Yeah. So this is the kickoff event for Linda's book tour. We're really lucky to have her today because the official on sale date is actually Tuesday. So you guys get a preview. You might want to ask her to date your book because that would be very cool.
And I would be happy to do that.
So welcome back.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back.
How long have we been doing this together?
I maybe 4 years, maybe 5.
Probably been 5. Linda was actually a writer-in-residence for The Poison Pen. Was it like 3 years ago, I think?
Yep, and I had 2 years ago, and I had such a good time. I really did. I did a class that trip,
Right?
and it was so much fun. It was a writing class, and so the audience, they were people who were either writing books or thinking about writing books, and we had some really good, funny conversations about editing. I don't think I can tell you guys what I was talking about, but I had self-published an old romantic suspense novel that I had written back in the 90s, and I had a major editing problem when I went. I had a problem with my character recognition software, and it was misspelling a lot of words, and wow, were some of the typos hilarious. And they were in stitches. I fessed up.
You could claim it was on purpose. You know? The great typo mystery would have been outstanding.
That would have been too strange.
It would have been, really. So the other day, it was July 1st, so it was like 2 weeks ago, Paul Doyon was here. And I really love Paul's books, and he writes about a game warden investigator, which is a role, as I think, maybe unique to Maine, or maybe only one or two other states allow game wardens to also investigate crimes. C.J. Box does not. Joe Pickett is not a formal investigator. Anyway, the point of this book is number 10th book. A huge part of it was a clash between some of the old style Maine people who didn't welcome the hugely growing Amish community in Maine.
I did not know that. Mike Bow did.
Fastest growing Amish community in the country. Wow, wasn't that a surprise?
You know, it is, because I have not done the research since I wrote Among the Wicked, which was set in upstate New York. At that point, which was probably 2 years ago, the fastest growing Amish population was upstate New York.
I remember you said that.
The Swartz and Druvers. Maine. I'll check it out.
Well, you know, because there's lots of vacant land, and
Right.
people want to go. It remains, you know, a border state, really kind of a frontier state in its own way, and so the Amish feel that they can go and establish their own communities there and so forth. But what's happened is they've run into some of the old style Maine people, and part of the problem in Paul's book, and Linda has written about this, is the buggy. You know, the Amish transportation, where they are driving buggies and with horses, and the Schwarzentrooper, I think it is, don't even want to use lights or whatever.
Or a slow-moving vehicle sign. And
Right.
It's caused a lot of very horrific accidents.
Yeah. Well, you had one in one of your books on prison. Absolutely one of the worst openings for a book. I mean, not bad, just horrendous for a book I've ever read.
In a good way.
I do. No, I do. But I mean, it was just like this god-awful accident. But so, you know, it's a real problem when you've got people, you know, driving on roads, and you got people with these. It's just one of the many places where there's built-in conflict between the Amish and the people living in the state. So,
Yes.
right. So I thought I wanted to bring that up because I didn't know if you had read Paul or even knew it.
I read the Mike Bowditch
Yeah.
series. I did not know about that book, and I did not know about the premise, but I'm dying to read it now.
Oh, good.
I really would like to read it.
And so those of you who, when you're finished Shamed, will be waiting for an Amish fix, we now have your answer, right? Which you can read Mike Bowditch number 10,
I think
which
he
is
just
called
made
Almost
US
Midnight.
He just made USA Today.
Oh, good, did he?
The bestseller list. Yeah,
Perfect.
I saw that on Twitter this morning.
So this is Kate Burkholder numbers at 9?
Actually, it's number.
Or if I lost one? 2. 11.
Yeah, number
Oh
11.
well, I've read them all and I absolutely love them for all kinds of reasons. This one, Kate has to, you know, well, you talk about Kate's backstory because I think it's integral to how she has to move through life as a chief of police in this area.
Well, when I created Kate Burkholder, and when I decided to set this sort of a police procedural murder mystery series in Ohio, I really wanted to create a character who could immerse us in the Amish culture. And so I thought to myself, what better way to do that than to have a person who was born Amish. And for whatever reason, which is revealed in the first book, Sworn to Silence, she left the Amish as an adult, and you know, basically she became English, and she found her way into law enforcement. And you know, 10 years later, she returns to Painter's Mill, which is a fictional town in Holmes County, Ohio. And the you know, town council, it's a tourist town. If you've ever been to how many of you have been to Holmes County? Well, it's a very touristy town, and so the town council, they wanted an individual for chief of police who could really keep the Amish happy and keep the tourists happy, because there's a little bit of a divide there. And so, you know, Kate wanted to believe that they hired her because, you know, she's a good cop. But, you know, really part of the reason that they hired her is because they thought she's going to be a good liaison between those two worlds. And I think that's sort of what sets her apart.
Yeah, absolutely so. But it does come back to haunt her when she goes to investigate something, and they throw her past at her or say, you know, but you've left us, or, you know, you're not really Amish at this point.
Right.
And she's dealing with a particularly closed section because there are degrees of Amishness like degrees of Jewishness. you know,
Right,
I mean, how strict
absolutely.
you want to be. And in this one, you've got a really strict group.
Yes,
Strict
swords
family
and
anyway.
movers are really, really strict. They're the ones, they consider a slow-moving vehicle sign ornamentation. And that is against their, church district, which is called the Yatnan. And they will not use that. They will not use them at the risk of their lives, the buggy, the horse, the family, whoever's in the buggy, because, the buggies are very difficult to see, especially at night.
So tell us about the bishops, because part of the story in this book is the function of bishops, Amish bishops making decisions rather than families making decisions.
Well, one of the things that has always intrigued me, and really not only about the Amish, about any group of people, if you take a good group of people and they run into a situation to where they may have to take the matters into their own hands, and perhaps in order to fix things they may have to do something wrong, what are the repercussions of that? And how far will they go to, cover their tracks? And that was really the driving force behind this book. I wanted to explore, one decision that was made, years before, all of the things that followed, and many of those things, are pretty terrible in this book. But that was really what intrigued me. How far would they go, and were they justified? Is somebody justified to basically, take the law into their own hands, or, something like that? So
You went straight to Plato. Actually, this is the Platonic question: who shall govern the governors? Which has been, philosophical, moral, and governmental question for like millennia. But this is I thought, a real classic of it. And unfortunately, we can't tell you what they did because it will absolutely ruin the entire book for you.
Yeah,
But
we tell you, we'll have to kill you.
True, but there is a horrendous murder that starts it off, and so you don't know what the driving force behind it. It is clearly is motivated by rage, and people are killed for different reasons. But if it's rage, usually the condition of the body and such is such that you can tell that it wasn't like an Agatha Christie more civilized kind of demise, right? Yeah. So she travels in part, which also made it interesting, is that she has to travel from Ohio. Is it down to Kentucky, if I remember?
Actually, it's just
where's she go, or is it just in Ohio, but
just
closer
Ohio,
to the river?
Just right on the Ohio
on the
River.
river,
Yeah,
right.
which is of course just north of Kentucky. So she's a little bit, she's out of her jurisdiction, to be sure, and she's in a strange area. She sort of doesn't know the players, and so she sort of has to talk with the the Amish bishops and sort of try to feel people out, figure out whether or not they're telling the truth, whether they're lying, and what they know. And I love to do that. I mean, it's so interesting because Amish church districts are different. I mean, when you were talking earlier about the different types of Amish, the beachy Amish, they can wear clothes the same as us. They can drive cars. They're still, they practice the Anabaptist religion, but then you have the Schwarzenegers. The women are the women wear the black, heavy winter bonnets, and then the clothes, they have to be dark gray, and the dresses have to come almost all the way to the ground. And so there are major differences and then subtle differences. And, so Kate gets into a whole new ballgame when she goes down to Southern Ohio.
Well, it's like Brooklyn, where there are Reformed Jews, and then the Orthodox Jews, and then you've got Hasidic Jews, and women are wearing wigs because they're not even allowed to show their hair, and that's been a big problem in the whole controversy about vaccination. Is that the more Hasidic community doesn't want to do that.
We need to ask Julia Dahl about that.
Yeah, she hasn't written one of those books. Faye Kellerman did a couple of books that were set there. Of course, the ritual bath, to start out with. But I love the image of the river in this book. I mean, the Ohio is flowing along, and it's a big river, and it's got a lot of dirt in it. Well, it does. I mean, it's that kind of river, not like the Mississippi at present. What's going on in New Orleans, by the way? I mean, has anybody kept up? Did the storm get them?
It's still flowing.
the river was rising before the storm came, and that's one of those things about those big rivers. They're so wonderful, but then they can turn absolutely lethal in the right conditions, and certainly the Ohio is one of those.
I have not kept up on the news, but I was kind of curious too.
But it's a lovely image in your book.
I love the Ohio River. I've been down in New Orleans. I just love rivers. They're murky. It seems like they have secrets. They're huge. You don't know what's beneath the water because the Ohio River is a little bit muddy like the Mississippi. And I did an event down at Portsmouth, Ohio, and that's really where I sort of got the idea to bring that setting into this book. And very, very interesting. That's sort of the heart of the opioid epidemic in Ohio down there. They're almost at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains down there, but just a beautiful area. A lot of there's a lot of poverty down there, but it's absolutely gorgeous and kind of intriguing. So
right, and the Amish are interspersed with not Amish in that area.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Which is a little different than Holmes Candy. See, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about for a moment, Kate has, as many of you know who've read the series, a livid lover who, just to make life complicated, actually is also in law enforcement, but not her law enforcement. So in this book, he's in an interesting place, I think.
He is, and I don't want to give anything away, but I love moral questions in a book. And that's, to me, that was one of the most interesting conversations that Kate Tonissetti have in this book, where they sort of go back and forth and they discuss the moral issues that they're facing. And so I think as far as their relationship, I think Kate is a little reluctant to. Tom said he wants to get married, and Kate is. I'm sure she loves him very much, but she isn't so got on getting married.
But they're more settled. You're not panicked they're going to rip apart like earlier books. You thought, are they really going to make it? Maybe not. But now they seem to be, so it isn't a question of their conflict likely to sever their relationship, but rather, as you say, the moral questions, because he's, after all, representing a different branch of law enforcement, and his responsibilities are different than hers as the chief of police. She's, in fact, out of her jurisdiction when she's down in, the lawyer in me comes back when I think about this stuff. You can't just randomly go to some other place where you are not the official authority and busily arrest people. And so, it just doesn't work that way. So, he has a larger remit than she does.
Yes, he's statewide. He's with the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which is basically out of Columbus. But, those guys are all divided into regions. And, Tonissetti basically, he was a little bit out of his coverage area down there, too. And, that's one of the things about, this book is a little bit police procedural. Do you think it had a little bit of a police procedural element? And you really have to get that right. It would be fun for you to be able to write your character and have them rush in with their gun and just take care of the bad guys. But when they're out of their jurisdiction, they basically have to go in as a civilian. And perspective is still from a cop perspective. But that was a little bit of a challenge.
It is a challenge. Well, I'm always fascinated. Every book you write is so different. I always think Linda's such a lovely, kind, generous person, and she does these terrible things to people in her books. I always find it kind of, slightly. I don't know what the right word is. Talking to you, it's so much fun because I think underneath is this mind that is, working along. But I really want to meet you in a dark place.
Several people have said that to me.
So my final question before we open it up, why did you decide in the first place to write about, you live in Texas.
I do.
So what drove you to Holmes County, Ohio to write about the Amish?
Well, I don't know. I have a confession to make. I don't know if you guys know this, but I began my writing career writing romantic suspense. And I was in a kind of a different position where I was writing for two publishing houses. I was writing for Harlequin Intrigue, which are smaller romantic suspense novels or mysteries. And I also sold a big single title to Berkeley. And in dealing with both of these editors, I had Kim at Harlequin, Kim Nadelson, and then I had Cindy Wong at Berkeley. And, the procedure was, you write your book, you turn it in, they read it, and then they send it back and they're, do a little bit of editing and make suggestions, which are usually helpful. And I realized that one of the suggestions that I was getting from both editors on both types of books, that, they would, I would get their comments back and they would say, Linda, these are romantic suspense novels, and you really need to concentrate on the relationship between the hero and the heroine. And that was at the point when I realized that I was basically killing too many people in these books, and I realized that's what my strength was, and that's what I loved.
I love that. Play to your strengths. Just kill people, right? That's really fun.
I kind of loved that scary, a little bit of a darker aspect. And so at that point, I really took a risk, and I started, I wanted to write a big breakout thriller. And I'm from Ohio originally, and my brother-in-law grew up in a 200-year-old farmhouse in Amish town, Fredericktown in Ohio. So we went for a visit, and I'm standing out in the front yard. It's very cold, there's snow on the ground. And I had been plotting this big thriller that I was going to write. I've been plotting it, sort of in my head for months. And I'm standing in the front yard, and I hear the clip-clop of shod hooves coming down the road. And I turn around and I look, and I see an Amish buggy. And it was that moment, I thought, if I take this thriller that had just a terrific plot, and I set it among the Amish, it was just one of those moments. There aren't very many moments when a writer knows that they're doing something right. Usually, when I write anyway, it's just like, this is wrong, this is wrong. When I made that decision, everything sort of came together, and that book was Sweat of Silence.
So, that's the origin story.
Yeah.
It's a really nice one.
Yeah.
So, Stuart, having listened to all that, you talk to writers in the UK, maybe not yourself, who have had sort of a similar epiphany where they were doing something and then...
Not about Amish people popping down
No.
the street.
No, but
In
you could do an
Manchester.
analogous, something analogous. I always find it interesting that the Scandinavian mysteries, which are so, like a tsunami of them, there's a tremendous number of small religious communities and so forth that are in those books, not Amish, but very conservative Christian, very fundamentalist. So I don't know, if that's a lot in England or English crime.
No, it's really fascinating to me hearing you guys talk about the Amish and those sorts of communities. They don't exist in the UK. They're just, there's small churches, like literally 17 people.
Yeah.
But the freedom to, tromp down the street on a horse is not there for them, so you just can't do it. We don't have the space, so you can't live this isolated lifestyle, so that's not there either. We have empty churches, effectively, Christianity writ large and diminishing all the time. And then there's, obviously, Islam's increasing all the time, there's a few Buddhists, but generally you've got your biggie religions, and that's pretty much it. So all this stuff is just fascinating to me. It's like, it's completely alien to think of it existing and to read into it. It's just like, really? You've got to be making some of this stuff up, right? No, you're not. Wow. Yeah.
But in a way, you kind of touched on an analogous thing when you were talking about the posh people in Christie. That was as foreign a community to you as perhaps the Amish might seem to, I mean, maybe what I'm saying is there are different communities that people can write about that are not familiar.
What happens in British crowds, and what generally seems to happen, is that they write about, or people will write about their communities. So there's a big divide in the UK between London and almost the rest of the UK. So in places like Newcastle, which is in the northeast of England, it's a big city, but it's a deprived city. Everywhere outside of London in the UK is effectively deprived. Manchester, Liverpool, all these places were once great cities, and our successive governments have just let them die, just let them wither on the branch and die, and all the resources have gone down to London. The really great thing that's happened in the last 15, 20 years in the UK is people started writing about those working class communities. They've stuck detectives up there in Newcastle and just watch how they go about their crimes, because people in the north, which is where I'm from, are chattier, we're smilier, we're happier, we'll make a joke, and then we will destroy you. That is, and that's where it will come from. Like somebody in Liverpool will be your absolute best friend until you cross them, and then they will devastate you. And it's so reading books in that setting is just a really fascinating, interesting thing. And what hasn't happened is that it's not yet been reflected on television too much. So that's what seems to be waiting for now, to see working class voices on the television, not just in literature. And as for the Scandi communities, that's just an entirely different world.
It is a different world, but even in Scotland, for a long time it was like Edinburgh, the Paris of the North and the whole bit. But recently there have been more people, Glaswegians, writing about Glasgow, and then Stuart McBride writes about the Granite City, Aberdeen, which is very much dark and hard men down the pub and all that kind of thing. So
not hard men, like tough men, just so you know. It's a different kind of fiction, that one.
Sorry?
That was a rude joke for Facebook.
Right. Okay. Well, down the pub is such a British expression. Why is it that people say down the pub rather than going to the pub or whatever? What is the cliche about down the pub? I've always been fascinated.
I have no idea. Did we go down the pub? We go to pub. We go down pit. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know about any of that stuff. The UK again is one of those. Okay, this is my voice after 13 years away from my hometown. After I talk to my dad for 2 minutes on the phone, I begin to sound a little bit like this, and then after that, I get a little. And when I talk to my friends, it's like, "All right, Allah, you're all right, great." So all those expressions are very specific. Like down the pub is specific to one bit of the UK. Anybody else will probably call it having a bit dizzle in the sizzle. I don't know. It will be something weird. Everywhere's weird in the UK and very, very distinct from the other places.
But that's one of the great things about crime fiction is that it embraces, all these different places and languages and, cultures and religions and all. And you get to learn so much while you're having fun reading a book. I mean, that's why I'm still doing it, after 70 years now, reading crime fiction. I always learn stuff,
And as a writer, it's really fun to do. I just wrote a very small piece. It was for the history reader about the history of the Amish and the Anabaptists. I thought I knew a lot about the Amish, and I know a good bit just because I've done a lot of research over the years. But back in Europe, mostly Switzerland and Germany, they were back in 1600s during the Reformation. They were horribly persecuted.
Yep.
And I mean, they were burned at the stake, they were drowned, all of these horrific things. And that was just because they mostly believed in adult baptism, which seems so, today that just seems very irrelevant.
What's the difference between the Mennonites in North Carolina, a community that I used to spend some time around, and the Amish in Ohio and now Maine, as we know?
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to Paul. But the Mennonites, is it evangelized? They try to recruit into their religion, and they are very, very organized. And of course, the Mennonites, any of us could be a Mennonite. Regular clothes. Some of them wear the more conservative, traditional, different type of head covering than what the Amish. The Amish are, they don't try to bring people into being Amish at all. They are very, very separate from the rest of the world. And then you have the Hutterites. And, that's more, their whole thing is it's sort of a communal living arrangement where, they'll live in sort of a, kind of like a commune. Type of situation. So those, and I read that there are no Amish left in Europe.
No, that doesn't surprise me.
They came here or they were killed. Yeah, or they were killed. Yeah.
It's bewildering. Like the religion thing in Europe, as you just travel around, it's almost been exercised. That's what it feels like. I mean, let's say the populations of churchgoers are dwindling. We are taught, we have religious schools, they have to follow the curriculum. The only difference is that they're allowed to teach, they have a Catholic, focus on Catholic, but then they have to teach all of the religions equally at the same time, so you don't just get, even if you go, I went to a Catholic school, I was taught, all about, then every other religion got equal time in that lesson, so you would never have known, whereas the other state schools pretty much got rid of it, so now they teach it as philosophy, effectively, rather than religion. So when you go to countries where I've lived in a few different places, but I travelled extensively around South America, which obviously is ingrained in the culture, it's deep in the culture, and it's almost a different way. It isn't almost, it's an entirely different way of seeing the world. There's a lens to see the world through. I didn't have it, I was never grown up with it, I don't understand it, I don't have this idea of God on your shoulder watching over, judging, helping, hindering, whatever it is, that simply isn't there for me. And talking to people who believe is incredible, it's an incredible thing, because there's so much. I mean, I can imagine how uplifting it could be. I can also imagine the pressure of it as well. How welcoming were the Amish when you were doing your research? Did you go into their communities?
I did. I actually did. I have a librarian friend in Ohio who knows several Amish families, and they were pretty welcoming. One of the women, she was a little bit standoffish. I think her comment went something like, "Why do you want to write those kinds of things?" And then the librarian pipes up, "But they're mysteries." And I can tell you, the gentleman that I met, we hung out, sat on his deck. His wife, 2 kids were there. Just had iced tea and cookies. He let me drive his buggy.
Oh,
we
wow.
walked down to the barn. He harnessed up the horse, let me drive his buggy. He was really laid back, and we took a picture. And you're not supposed to take pictures of the Amish.
Right.
They have this thing against graven images. You just cannot do it. Children you can, because they've not been baptized yet. But he was in one of the pictures. It was sort of his belly. He had kind of a belly, and he didn't care.
Yeah.
So he was pretty laid back. He wasn't didn't really care too much about the rules. So it's really interesting. Not only are the Amish, but they're human, and all of us break some rules at some point, and we follow the rules, and then we break the rules, and we don't worry about it sometimes. So I think you're the same way.
That's the thing for me, I see the Amish community and I'm like, God, that should be super chill. You're not on social media for a start. I would assume that'd be brilliant. If nothing else, you don't have Twitter and Facebook. But they've got so many rules that they're quite uptight. It's a shame.
Yeah.
You could be living a wonderful life. You could be having a great time.
No
Interesting
Twitter.
thought there. If you live in a community where the rules are established and superimposed and you follow them, as compared to living in a community where you have to generate your own, because there aren't these community rules and norms.
Well,
I
we
think
have
are
laws.
very interesting.
That does
We
the
do.
job. Yeah. But that's again, why would we add? It's strange to me that anybody would ever add any more rules to their life when there's so many you've already got to follow.
Right.
Bewildering. Well, yes, I have to pay my taxes. Well, that annoys me on a daily basis. But then driving over potholed roads annoys me as well. So, everything's for the societal benefit. But all the rules are there. We live it. Whether you have a religion or you don't, you believe in God or you don't, you're still living under Scripture. It's just who came up with the Scripture and what the overall benefit is and who is benefiting from it. And increasingly in the UK, and not to get in politics at all, but the overwhelming feeling in the UK is that people benefiting from the Scripture we live under are the politicians rather than necessarily the people, and it's become a big divide for us. So
It's a confusing world. We appear to be in a time of transition. So do people have, any of you have questions you'd specifically like to ask our
I have
audience?
one.
Sure.
What's a bank barn?
Oh,
I
bank barn.
Thank you for
Running
asking
into that, and I don't know what it is.
I hope I can do the description justice. I grew up living on a farm with a big bank barn. It's a German style, and what happens is when the barn is built on a hill, the uphill side has 2 stories, and the downhill side has 3 stories. And usually that bottom story on the downhill side, that's where the animal stalls are. And usually on the top side, there's a ramp that you can drive your trailer if you've got hay. If you've got a wagon, if you're Amish, you can back it in there into the big barn door, and you can unload your hay, or use a pulley, put it up into the hayloft.
Okay.
And it's actually really
that
good.
makes sense because I think it's in this one, were talking about a bank barn, and I'm like, okay, there's the hay, and
You're
then
like,
there's
what
the
the
animals,
heck is
and
the
it's
bank
like,
barn?
It's like, what's going on
It
here?
was the
Where they
best
keep all the
place.
money.
And we don't like bankers. But it's a great place to play when you're a little kid too. I mean, there's hayloft and groundhog holes, and I mean all of these interesting things.
So where in Ohio did you grow up?
I would say probably Ithaca area, which is the western part. It's kind of the farming part of the state. So it's not as pretty as the eastern part where Amish country is, but not too far away.
When you started writing your first book, did you know it was going to turn into 11 plus? Because you have these half ones in there too. You've
I
got the
do.
short stories in there too.
You know, I was hopeful because when I wrote that first book, I wanted it to be a breakout book. And so I had enough writing experience at that time to do certain things that would maybe make it more appropriate to be a series. I introduced the secondary characters, for example, in John Tomasetti, and I was hopeful, but I really didn't have any idea. I really wrote that book on spec. I didn't know if they were going to hate it in New York, if they were going to love it. I just didn't know. I had sent it to one of my critique partners, and you know what she told me? I'm wondering where the old Linda Castillo is. You know, and that was difficult. That was difficult, but that's, you know, we as writers, we get that a lot. I don't know if you received harsh critique on your book.
Mainly for my best friends.
Okay.
Yes.
They claim to love you, but
Yeah. When it comes to anything you put in front of them, no, this was my debut, so I wrote it basically very quietly
yeah.
and didn't let I'm not good with talking about my ideas beforehand. I can't walk into a room of other writers and be like, let's share.
Yeah.
I don't want to read other people's half-formed novels. I have no interest in that.
No.
I don't want to read my half-formed novel. So I just sat there for two years by myself in my bedroom quietly and just did it.
Yeah.
And then when I came out the other end, then I was like, well, the person I want to read this is an agent, not my friend who happens to have read some books. Because it's not the same. Reading and writing are not the same skill.
Very, very different.
And yet everybody seems to think it is.
Yeah,
well, I wrote an email once, I'm going to try a novel now. I get that a lot.
So I was going to ask Stuart to finish up. He, as I've mentioned to you, was just at Thriller Fest with me, which is one of the large American literary things, but devoted to the thriller specifically. So was that your first encounter with something like that, at that scale? Or have you been to ones in Europe? Because there's some huge events in Europe.
I've been to a lot of Europe, things that have been the same size. Or a bit bigger or a bit smaller, but around there. No, I mean, the interesting thing about those is always, I thought by coming to the US, this is my first time, that was my first time in New York, this is my first time here, hello, it's great. And then I thought I'd be kind of getting away, because in the UK, the publishing industry is in London, and then around Europe, you've obviously got, I've been to Spain, been to Italy, been to France, done a lot of stuff around there. I mean, we sold the book in 27 countries, so we've got, I'm basically touring for the entire year, and what keeps happening is I keep going to places like Greece and bumping into my same friends who are in London, and it's just like, what are you doing here? Yeah. And the same thing happened in Thriller Fest, because it is so big that it gets everyone who's written that style of book out there, because there's just gravity to these things, you have to be there. So it was really good fun, it was really great, but it ended up just being me and the same 4 friends that I have in London parties, being in the corner just getting drunk. It was great.
I love it. It's sort of a, what is it Hemingway wrote, a movable feast?
Yeah.
It is kind of along those lines. Right. Well, I see that John has brought delicious treats out for you all. I'm going to ask Ian to come so I can wave bye. Everybody on Facebook that has been kind enough or will be kind enough to watch it, so
thanks,
everybody
Facebook.
on Facebook.
Bye.
Delightful.
I didn't mean to crack about the Amish not having social media. I forgot you were there.
They're probably not going to watch it on Facebook, so you're
All
probably
right. I don't know. I think this could get them on.
just a reminder to all of you, if you missed anything or if you want to share this afternoon with your friends, you can go to the Poison Pen Facebook page and click on video. And Patrick, at some point, will probably move this over to our YouTube channel, because not everybody goes to Facebook, but we do try to share these. And I was able to mention at Thriller Fest that, to my great surprise, a couple years ago, Poison Pen Press signed up an author from India, East India, really nice guy, and he wrote to me and he said, I went to the Pune Literary Festival, which is somewhere in India, and I told everybody that I was a new Poison Pen Press author, and he said, wow, he said, you're a rock star in Pune. And I thought, that can't be right. But then it turned out that all the people who went to the Pune, the writers and so forth, their access to other writers was watching the Poison Pen broadcast, the video. So they were all entirely familiar with, and actually there's an English author, a British author you might know, who said he learned about writing from watching all the other interviews that we did. So he brought himself to the store when he published his first book with HarperCollins, actually. I can't remember his name at the moment, because he had done that. So,
That's cool.
we've been doing this now for, 30 years in October, but, the technology doesn't go back that far, so maybe 10 years worth of all this and stuff. But that's one reason we do it, is the chance to share. You all are here, which is lovely, and we're so glad you are. But for all those people who aren't here, who would like to be here, we give them a chance to do that. Also, we have now got our podcasts on iTunes and Google Music. So there's a bunch up there, and I'm going to now make an effort to do more. So if you don't have time to watch a video, you can always download the podcasts and listen to them, which I think will be really fun. So let's thank our authors for coming this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. And let's give John Charles a round of applause for both the interview and the food. Right. Do not miss the cookies, because they're incredibly good. This is the moment in which I'm going to thank all of you for coming.